Thank you very much for being here. I see some of you have been here throughout the day, so I know that the interest in tiny houses is big and growing. Let me introduce our speakers for our 2 o'clock session, Social Impact and Sustainability of Tiny Houses. First is Mario Cambardella. Mario is Urban Agriculture Director in the City of Atlanta Mayor's Office of Sustainability. He's co-founder and CEO of Urban Agriculture, a firm that provides planning, design, and construction management for food-producing landscapes for commercial, municipal, and residential clients. He holds dual master's degrees in landscape architecture and environmental planning and design, and a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture, all from the University of Georgia. Brian Preston is fueled by a fierce passion for winning, an unbridled desire to change the world for the better, using the best business practices while giving back. After building a thriving construction company, creating jobs became his #1 passion. Brian believes work is directly connected to our soul, and the sooner we discover our purpose and work is directly connected, the sooner we begin to truly live life to the fullest. In 2012, Brian founded Lehman Luther, a company committed to rebuilding lives while building furniture, which has been featured on CNN, AJC, Huffington Post, and CBS Evening News. Brian has also spoke about his unique business model at TEDx, and was recently selected among the top 50 folks that are changing the South by Southern Living. You guys are going to be great. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Mario Cambardella. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I serve as the mayor's first urban agriculture director of the city of Atlanta. Before I go there, I want to talk about this place, talk about where we came from, the roots. Does anybody know where this place is? It looks like Italy, correct? Right? Yeah, with a name like Mario Cambardella, you probably thought it was Irish. Yeah. This is Ellis Island. Now, could you imagine my grandfather came over on a boat in 1921 when he saw this place? He goes, oh my God, we sailed right around America. We're already back where we came from. But this is Ellis Island, 1921. This is the building that my grandfather came to when he came to this country from Centilla, Italy, just south of Naples. And it was part of the Italian Risposa. And this was a great migration of a lot of Italian immigrants to multiple parts of the country and multiple parts of the world, all over the United States and also all of South America as well. One of the reasons for this mass exodus of Italians from Italy was the lack of sound conservation practices that denuded the soil of nutrients that was needed for growing wine, grapes, food, and the agrarian life that many of these, especially Southern Italians, were accustomed to and needed to sustain themselves and their families. So in search of a better being, a better life for a sustainable life and career, my grandfather saw new opportunities in America. He came in 1921 with a buddy, just him and a friend, Paisano, and immediately got employment coming right off the boat. He worked in a mine. One short year, actually 9 months, he was taking a boat back to Italy. He said, never in the mine for me. He couldn't sustain himself in that working condition. For the next 8 years, he met my grandmother, and they set a plan forward for a dream back to America. They were going to do it very differently this time. In 1928, they arrived back at Ellis Island. And what the difference was, is they brought people with them. And I'll get back to what that means. This was the house that my grandparents grew up in, but it was actually just that little piece, less than a tiny house itself. So they brought with them all the other friends and families in their community. And all these people it was basically this mass network. They also brought the butcher with them. They also brought the community barber. They also brought the shoemaker. They also brought the seamstress, or the tailor. And that's my grandfather, not an actual picture of my grandfather, but he was the garbage man. And I'm very proud that he was the garbage man because he identified the great resource in what other people called waste. And so not during the daytime, yes, or maybe more the nighttime, yes, he was the garbage man. But during the daytime, he was the community gardener. And he used that, which there was no such thing as inorganic material at the time, so everything was organic, everything could be created back to a viable, usable product. And to build soil. He had learned the lessons from what he grew up with was poor conservation practices, and he knew that if he went down that road again, he was going to have to move again. And so to take root in this new country, he had to build from what others called waste. He had to find a new foundation. And the foundation was not just from the recognition of these resources that were in abundance all around them, but it was also in the resource in this relationship they had created in a network or an ecosystem with their friends and family. And it was these moments, it was these times that allowed them to establish themselves in these communities. And it wasn't so much where they lived, but it was how they lived. It wasn't so much what they ate, but who they ate with. That really allowed them to not just sustain, we use the word sustainability today, back then it was survivability. Survive well. It's not much different than today. Same friends, the same pizza. It's still pepperoni. But it's really the common bond that we have these friends and family and really the earth around us. So I can talk about sustainability benefits of tiny houses, how it impacts the social realm, the ecological realm, the economic realm, and yes, to many of your point, what's the point of this tiny house movement if we can't make affordable housing? I hear you loud and clear. I'm not going to rifle through all these. Yes, there are sustainability benefits, but I think the most important things that I want to get to is this idea of rooted authenticity. And the idea that comes in many forms, not just in the experience. When you walk into one of these tiny homes, you have a different experience. It feels real. It feels authentic. It's not just a service of somebody providing this house for you to live in. It's not just a product that you can tow around on a trailer. It's not just a collection of materials that you can buy at Home Depot. That it is not medial. It is not this large house with poorly crafted products, or poorly crafted materials, poorly crafted products, poorly crafted service, that really does not lend itself to a sense of place or a sense of time, but it does have all these things that we are looking for, that it stays true to the material. It stays true to the product. It stays true to the service. And it creates a remarkable experience. And we get down to the word remarkable, and we make remarks about it. We want to tell somebody else about it. And that is what a remarkable entity it is. One of the things I believe that's going to sustain this movement long term, and it's much like any other movement, One, of course, not to confuse motion with action, which is important. That comes from Benjamin Franklin, that quote. But also that we must look at this movement as a necessity for people upsizing, we use colloquial terms, and downsizing. And that we really create no judgment. That it's not about that. That it's really more about real, authentic relationships. It's about friends, it's about family, and the world around us. I want to finish off with one quick quote, and I'm going to turn the mic over. Before I do, I want to recognize that when we speak to the sustainability of this social realm of the places that we're trying to create, it is complex, and it is a bit messy. But it should challenge us to increase the conversation and to speak about it honestly. The power of space is great, and it is always active for creation and destruction. It is the basis of the desire of any group of human beings to have a place of their own. A place which gives them reality, presence, the power of living, which feeds them body and soul. This is the reason for the adoration of the earth and the soil. Not of the soil generally, but of the special soil, and not of the earth generally, but of its divine powers to connect with this special space of earth. I'm going to hand it now over to Brian. And
awesome, thank you, Mario. Fantastic talk. My name is Brian Preston, and I just want to talk to you guys about shelter. And how many of you guys would agree that shelter, excuse me, is crucial to humanity? How many of you guys would believe that? Awesome. Okay, so for those of you that may not know, there are 100 million people living worldwide without shelter. 100 million people. That's a huge problem in our world. Moreover, there is almost 1 million people in the U.S. alone that are homeless. Right here in the greatest country that we've ever seen, there are almost 1 million people living homeless. So a few years ago, I started this company building houses. My goal as a 22-year-old kid dropping out of college, being fascinated with building and constructing, was to be a millionaire by the time that I was 30 years old. Any of you guys ever had that dream? Maybe some of you have achieved that. It's incredible. But I was so infatuated with just gaining wealth and collecting more stuff and just anything that I could get my hands on, just to have the nice cars and the nice house. And I was so infatuated with that for so long. And we built a pretty great business. My wife is here today and my family. And we built a pretty great business. We had people working on us. We were building beautiful homes. And then this thing happened in 2008. Anybody remember that? Anybody affected by that? A lot of us were. So 2008, had built this great business, had a few guys working for me full time, people depending on me, subcontractors looking to me to provide consistent work, and I lost everything. I lost my house, I lost my car, we lost everything. It actually gotten so bad that we were having yard sales just to sell stuff, trying to just make ends meet. And so poverty became real. Shelter, the need for shelter for me became extremely real in 2008, 2009. So it was in that moment where my motivation shifted from wanting to gain all this wealth and the big house and the nice cars to, here I am, a good guy, I'm a pretty nice guy, and I've lost it out. Who else is like me that may have been affected by poverty or maybe affected by the economy? And so it was in that moment that I decided I was going to devote my life to helping others. And I didn't know what it looked like, and I really had no plan. I was just like, something's got to change for me in my life. So that's what we did. I actually worked at a church for about 4 years as a creative director. And what I learned during that time was the power of telling great stories. And just being able to hear authentic, real community, family, friends talking about the life change that they experienced. But there's still something missing. I was kind of like the rough guy that was working at church, like, what is that guy going to say? Don't say any cuss words at church, that type of thing. I was still rough. I still had a passion to build and construct. And I met a couple of guys living in a homeless camp in my community. And at the time we were in Douglasville, Georgia, and I didn't think homeless people actually lived in Douglasville, but there was this entire homeless camp right there in my community. So we started going out there and just hanging out, bringing them, meeting basic needs like firewood, bringing them, propane they had little gas grills, bringing them food. And it didn't take me long to realize that a lot of these guys just needed jobs. They needed an opportunity to help themselves. And so I quit my job at the church and we started this company called Lehman Luther. And we actually take broken, reclaimed material to build reclaimed furniture. I don't know if you guys are local to this area, but Krog Street, we did all those tables, Ladybird. So we're doing a lot of restaurant tables here in the community. But there was something that I still saw missing in my guys as we were giving them jobs. They still didn't really have a place to call home. That this idea of not having shelter was still a huge need for employees. And it kind of hit me one night because our first employee, TC, he's incredible. He's actually here. We have 2 tiny houses here. It's the one of the big black ones, and then the shipping container. I'd love for you guys to come out and check them out. But TC, our first employee, is actually here. He actually helped build the tiny houses. So what we saw was TC was sleeping on the floor of our shop. And TC, he's been homeless for 20 years. He doesn't have credit, right? He can't just go get an apartment somewhere. He has transportation issues. He hasn't had a driver's license since 1985, so we can't just put him anywhere. He's got to be in close proximity to work. So we had this crazy idea back in February this year. So what can we do to try to solve this housing issue with our employees? So what we actually did is we built a tiny house and we raffled it off. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, hey, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think about it? She was like, start with a table, maybe raffle a table. I was like, no, we're going to raffle a tiny house. Just because of the power of the movement, I knew that people would get excited about it. So what actually happened is we got some great vendors to donate some of the plumbing fixtures. We got some other people involved, and we just put it out there kind of to the world. And we raised enough money from raffling off that tiny house to not only provide housing for TC, but to actually purchase a house that's in close proximity to our shop. And so I say all that to say that it really showed me the need to, this whole movement of living minimalist. Millennials, a lot of millennials hadn't even bought their first house yet. We believe that they're going to be buying houses like the tiny house. And obviously the problem is we got to get cities on board with this movement, right? So I've got a ton of great guys. There's a lot of people that have great work skills, but they can't afford $150,000 house. They can't afford a $100,000 house. They deserve home ownership. And so the tiny house movement is such a great means to provide housing. So we are actually launching a sister business called Shelter Supply Company. I'm really excited to tell you guys about it because it's very similar to our furniture business. We believe social enterprise is the greatest vehicle to actually help people. Nonprofit, NGO, all those things are great, but we actually use for-profit business models to help people, to employ people. And so with our tiny house business, we are actually, for every house that we build, we are giving a house away to somebody in need. It's a Tom's 1-for-1. Thank you. Thank you. It's if you guys have heard of Tom's Shoes, it's a complete 1-for-1 model. It's all about helping other people. My wife and I, we go to Haiti every year, and some of the living conditions in third world countries is crazy. And we live in such a rich country because for $2,500, $5,000 can build a whole amazing house in a third world country like that. That's just really kind of pocket change for the most American families. And so I'd love for you guys to check it out. We're actually launching this September, sheltersupply.co. I would love for you guys to check it out. Also, the tiny house out there, we're raffling that one off. So I'd love for you guys to come out and see it. It's our second giveaway. It's happening October 5th. You can go online, tinyhousegiveaway.co. We create a whole website for it, and it's got all the information about our house. So $20 entry can get you a chance to actually win a tiny house. So that's all I got. We're going to take some questions right now. So if you have any questions about social impact, how, anything for us in terms of job creation, and obviously Mario works directly with the mayor, so we're just going to open it up to the floor now. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question. We've done a little bit with tiny homes, and one of the biggest challenges that we've run into is the cost of site infrastructure relative to development projects. Because you get this micro home, and you'd like to think that there's a micro infrastructure that would go with that. But when you start getting into the city's parking regulations, and all the regulations, you wind up with the tail wagging the dog. You get this big site infrastructure cost for these little tiny homes, which kind of, to us says, well, okay, if you're in a rural setting and there are no regulations, or you got a mobile home park, it works. But if I'm in a city situation, it makes it much more difficult. So, thoughts about that?
Mario, I'll pass the mic to you. For me, I think about community. I'm sorry, repeat the question. Okay, so what he's asking is he's saying, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth. He's basically saying it seems like it's a big challenge for cities to adopt the tiny house infrastructure. And I'm assuming you're talking about utilities, sewer, water, electrical, site infrastructure, zoning, all these different issues that would allow a piece of dirt to become a tiny house community. And I completely agree with that. Some of the things that, as I'm kind of my real estate development background a little bit, I'm looking at parcels that already have infrastructure in place, like an RV community that may be dilapidated. All the sewer's there, all the plumbing's there, all the electrical's there. So that's the kind of property that we're looking at. The unfortunate thing is there's nothing ITP, right? There's nothing inside the perimeter that fits that parameter. But you don't have to look very far out. Like on West Georgia, there's some parcels that are abandoned. Not mobile home sites, but RV parks that have been abandoned. And it seems to me that those should be ready, right? It seems like all the infrastructure is in place. Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
I've been fortunate enough to, in my prior life as a landscape architect, design a few cottage communities, and some of the infrastructure that we looked into because it was cost. These were outside urban areas, more sort of the edges of suburban, rural, peri-urban areas. Community septic, the reclamation of gray water, community composting. These are just some of the things that can kind of eat away at some of those infrastructure costs. Other things were, third-party solar, getting somebody else to invest in the solar panels and making orientation of all the buildings to capture solar. So these are some of the ecological advantages of just having a planned community development and then working on solidifying basically, net zero and hopefully net positive, especially when we start talking about third-party financing for solar.
Let me just say one other thing. I appreciate that. I think one thing to think about, we've done a lot of community improvement, and tiny houses are standalone. And if there's a way, particularly in urban context, to take 2 or 3 or even 4 tiny homes and somehow plug them together so that they function more as a quote single house but have exterior entries and so on, that's a way to skirt the infrastructure cost issue and so on. That's just it.
Yeah, the last question from Greg was, just bringing some of these tiny houses together to make it more a unified development on maybe one particular lot and I think that some of the plans, the last presentation had a great example of that, where they had the largest tiny home up at the front and some of the smaller tiny homes toward the back. which created, in her words, the wall as you walk down the street, that it resembled the same pattern, the same rhythm of the street was a continuous rhythm. So, the way in the back.
So what do you think the ratio is of tiny houses that are aimed at reduction of use of resources versus tiny houses that are essentially glorified RVs? I use that term in the manner of the second home where we're going to vacation there, we're still fix the grid, we're still utilizing the same level of resources for Decatur.
And this is where, yeah, to surmise your question, what is, if you were to group them in buckets, saying some people that are trying to capture the ecological benefits over here, and then versus some more of the social benefits, is that close? Apologies. I think it goes back to one of the points, and I'll introduce a new thought, is no judgment. I think that's number one. And I think number two is that sustainability is oftentimes a process, and that it needs to consider all three of those legs of the stool, three-legged stool: social, economic, and ecological. And so, whereas you might be high on one and lower on another, at least you're considering where you are. Once you consider where you are, then it's time to reconsider where you need to be or where you want to go. And then you continuously improve upon that. Anything, right? Any other questions? Ma'am?
I don't even, that's not true, but say, I grew up here, and I went to Fairmont Elementary, and a lot of my friends lived in the trailer park, which is where, it's Church Street, where it comes back to Scott Boulevard, back in there where we had the outside theater, movie theater, drive-in theater, that's back in the day. But lots of trailer homes still in Decatur. Is that even possible in Decatur?
Is trailer hooks possible in Decatur? I don't know. Is it possible? I think anything is possible.
Is there a zoning?
You know, the planning and zoning official from Decatur was in the lecture just before this, and she'd be best to answer that.
Because in a sense, we're almost saying, people have the right to have that kind of housing in urban areas.
Yeah, it seems like to me, so the question is again, why isn't this the same model as kind of the mobile home communities that popped up, we saw, I guess, back in the 50s and 60s, maybe it was prior to that. And unfortunately, that's where kind of the affordable housing was inside the context of those communities. And unfortunately, what comes with that is high crime rates and high, which is unfortunate. So I think what happened is because of that, local governments tried to eradicate it because that was the assumption. And it's unfortunate because all these tiny houses out here are nice, right? I mean, they are really nice, top of the line. And I think it's unfortunate that we still, put those types of structures in that category. Oh, that's where all the crime's going to be, and that's just a trailer or whatever. It's an unfortunate stigma that I think we have to really focus on changing the conversation. And I like to think, anything's possible, right? Like, let's really think about, just the way we live in the community. So, any other questions? Okay. That's a great question. So her question was, do we know of any cities in the U.S. that are successfully integrating tiny house communities? You do, okay. Would you mind coming up and sharing about it? Is that okay? I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay, I'll hand you mine. You guys give it up, yeah.
I do not live there, but I've been doing a lot of research to try to do the same in my own community. But Spur, Texas now has 60, and they kind of dubbed themselves the tiny home capital of the United States. So Spur, Texas would be something to look up for an example of success.
One other example. Thank you. What's your name? Carol, thank you. Seattle, Washington there's a for-profit business called the Cottage Company that has a number of cottage-style developments, and they have actually effectively changed the zoning code. It's not necessarily deemed tiny house because some of them are over 500 square feet, but many of them live within that 600 to 900,000 square foot range, where they are developing these communities, somewhere between 7 and 12 of these homes facing inward onto a common green, shared parking, shared small common house. And it's been integrated well, seemingly, seeing that the resale value for these homes are astronomical, which is a problem in itself. But it has been seamlessly integrated into existing neighborhoods that share like the quarter-acre lot.
What's the name again?
Cottage Company out of Seattle, I believe. But they have a few developments up and down sort of the suburbs of Seattle. But beautiful developments.
Given your position within the city and mayor's office, what's the best way these folks can advocate for communities?
That's a great question, Lindsay. She has asked me about 20 questions in preparation for this. So the question was, how can the neighboring city of Atlanta provide additional information and get more people involved? Did I get it right? I didn't get it right.
How can the folks in this audience and other tiny home advocates best make their voice heard in the mayor's office so that we can see tiny homes in the city of Atlanta?
Thank you. It's a great question. Way to tee it up. Mayor Reed has heard the call, and the planning department, Tim Keene is our commissioner. The mayor's office sustainability director is here today, Stephanie Binfield, if you would give her a wave. They have heard the call and have convened a task force to review, recognize, and hear from the City of Atlanta community on how to move forward to make a tiny home, whatever that is, whatever, if it's a district overlay, whatever the mechanism is, to make sure that it works for all citizens and the process is inclusive to everyone. So be on the lookout for more information. I'm sure you can get additional information. Stephanie, you want to grab the mic and add a few things?
Because I've been going to those task force meetings.
So Kwanzaa Hall, who's a city councilman, has been a big advocate for the tiny home movement. He passed a resolution creating this tiny home task force through the planning department. And I went to the last meeting. We've met twice now, and we met last week. So we're looking at revising the zoning code to allow for tiny homes to be built, because currently the minimum square footage does not allow for these 500 square feet and under tiny homes. So we're working on revising those. So if you want to be involved with the process, I would just say reach out to either Mario or I, and we're happy to give you updates on how we're doing. South Face Energy Institute, some of you are familiar with the good work they do. They're help facilitating those conversations. So we've got some experts at the table looking at best practices all over the country. So we do want to make sure that Atlanta is allowing for these communities, and we're looking at best practices. So feel free to come up to us afterwards. Next festival will be in Atlanta.
Great.
I just want to say that the best example I've seen of tiny homes, and it came long before the tiny home movement, are in Berkeley, and I'm sure there are probably in other kind of historic cities around the country, where they essentially took, you can go find these, there's a place called Fox Court in Berkeley. They basically take a single family lot, so imagine a lot that's 50 by 100 to 150 feet deep, and they create this marvelous entry lane, walking lane, and had these beautiful cottages just sprinkled. Sometimes they're single loaded, sometimes they're double loaded. In Berkeley, they'll have a lot of times kind of a Latin, Spanish kind of motif, but they can be done with any motif. So they found a model where you can buy a single lot, have the infrastructure that feeds a single lot, and develop 5 to 10 homes on either a single or possibly sometimes a double lot. But here's the key to it. If you go up now to 2016, and everybody has 1 or 2 cars, you've entirely changed the model. It no longer works. Now you have land that's costly. You have to start looking at stacking cars under, or you've used half your land for a parking lot. So one of the critical pieces to getting that model to work again is to integrate sustainable transportation. If you can get to where you can walk to everything and commute to your work, and you can do a model like that that's got 2 or 3 cars with 10 homes, maybe there's zip cars or whatever. Now you've solved the infrastructure issue and the parking and transportation issue.
Thank you, Greg. Any other questions? Well, we thank you very much. Do you have any final notes?
Yeah, I actually have a question for you guys, because a lot of the conversations that we're hearing from you guys, how many of you guys are interested in actually developing a community, maybe taking an acre you have in Atlanta and turning that into a tiny house community? Because it seems like there's a lot of people that's interested in that. Would you raise your hand if you're interested in actually, for lack of a better term, giving up your parcel to maybe let this be a experiment for tiny house? Would you raise them again? I just want to see. It's pretty amazing. It's awesome. So it sounds like there's a lot of activity. Do you have a comment? Okay. Do we have time?
There are quite a few of us in the suburbs who would love to find an acre, not necessarily to put tiny houses on, but to develop a community, like a co-housing community, which Decatur has one on East Lake. Decatur has 2, I believe. So that interest is there definitely, I would say.
Awesome, that's great. So anybody have anything else you want to add? Okay. Can you scream at me?
I talk pretty loud. I mean,
Okay.
and this is my inside voice. I think it would be really useful for an aging community too, because you would have older people who still want their home, that don't really need somebody to watch over them all the time. They just need someone nearby to keep an eye out. If they fall, they need something, and you can create a small senior community as well.
That's a great comment. So for those of you that hear, she said that maybe an aging community, a retirement type community, this context or this mold would fit perfectly inside that. And I have to say, we're actually building a tiny house for a 90-year-old couple right now. And they are downsizing. They sold their house. They're just kind of getting rid of everything. And it's kind of been interesting to just see that process for them. But they are so excited about just living with what they need. So I think it's a great point. Yeah, that's a great question. So the house that we're building for them is actually a 40-foot long tiny house, which is not too tiny. It's like right at 400 square feet. And it's about $50,000. Yeah. So we're trying to really look at practices to build these things affordable. And I think the more, it's like manufacturing anything, the more you do it, you can streamline it, you can assembly line the process to bring the prices down. So that's what we're really trying to focus on with our company. Okay, right here.
Just real quick, this lady, we did the 2 co-housing communities, so we'll be here after if anybody's interested in that.
All right, so he's saying that he actually developed those 2 communities that she was referring to in Decatur. So if you guys have a need, Atlanta, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Greg Ramsey.
Greg Ramsey. So you guys be sure to see Greg Ramsey.
Where did the 90-year-olds, where are they putting their $50,000
That's a great question. So we're out in West Georgia, and so this is going to live on 10 acres in Douglas County. The 90-year-old couple, yeah, the 40-foot tiny house. And so their son-in-law is actually the commissioner, so that helps a lot. So That's all I'll say about that. But they are really excited, and you know, even Douglas County's trying to figure out how to allow these out in their county. Yes, it's a tiny house on wheels. That's correct. All right. I think we have. Can we do one more? Sure. Okay.
With people of that age, in terms of accessibility for mobility aids, et cetera, what measures are being taken in order to ensure that they're safe in their homes at that age and not, you know, tripping over things, running into things, et cetera? What are the measurements that you're putting into place to make that more accessible?
That's a great question. So the question is what measurements are we putting in place in this tiny house design that's making sure that it's safe and accessible for 90-year-old people. And so I'll tell you, this tiny house is ADA, meaning it's full. Both of them can walk very well. They're in great shape, but we do realize that there may be some point in time, it's all on one level too, that's why it's 40 foot long. So there's no stairs, there's no lofts. And so each opening is gonna have 3 feet, 36 inches wide, which is ADA compliant. Also the shower, you know, some showers have like a little lip. This will not have a lip, so they actually can roll, a wheelchair in there if needed or something like that. So those are just a few of the things, and I'll be happy to talk to you about more of those things after this is over. So I think we're out of time.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, Mario.
So our next session starts at 3 o'clock, and it's going to be a couple of folks who are actually living in tiny homes discussing